name's Wayne Stables and I'm a visual effects supervisor at Weta Digital, which is a visual effects company based in Wellington, New Zealand. My role is I supervise on films or on large chunks of films, which will typically mean that I will oversee a large number of sequences. Like in the case of Tintin, I might look after about a third of the film, something like that. I did a similar job on Avatar. Traditionally, visual effects supervisors might look after a whole show, and indeed out at Weta that still happens, but for some of these very big shows where it's too much for one person to have to track and to deal with, we just split them up. So the film, I guess, first came to us based on work we'd actually done on Lord of the Rings, and I think that was where Stephen had contacted Peter and Richard Taylor and Joe Lettieri. This was sort of to talk about our involvement possibly in a live action Tintin film, and he was interested in that stage and what we might do with Snowy, and I'm sure that was based in no small part probably on the work he'd seen we'd done on Gollum for Lord of the Rings. And it kind of we sort of just kept with him with working on it, but waiting while our own technology developed in terms of being able to make it into an animated film. And certainly for us, I think it being our first truly animated film, there was a lot that we had to learn. We were lucky that we had done Avatar beforehand, and by doing Avatar, we had obviously been involved very heavily in getting much more heavily involved in motion capture and performance capture, and some of the pre-visualization that James Cameron had done on Avatar. So those type of disciplines for coming into an animated film, we'd already had some experience with, so we weren't completely new to it in terms of as a film type. I came onto the project. I'd actually been working a little bit overseas, and I'd come back to Weta, and I actually came back onto the project in some form in about 2007, and that was when we were doing some very early tests and some very early lighting tests for Stephen on one sequence inside the film, which was actually a little part inside the corridors of the Caribou Jan. And so we spent a bit of work then again there. This is before they'd done the motion capture shoot for the show. This was still, once again, early in previs days. And there was also a number of other scenes that we worked through at that point in time. Scenes take place inside Silk's apartment and out on the streets of Labrador. It was some early sort of work with Jamie Bell, who ended up playing Tintin. It was him kind of coming along and seeing how he fit the role. So we did some motion capture with him that we then put in and did a very simple renders of, but so that Peter and Stephen could look at it and just sort of see, yeah, this was the way in which they wanted to go with the movie. When we started to look at how to, Tintin being the best example of the characters we really had to work out how to bring, how we were going to have to adapt them. Our first step, and we always do this, is really try to understand the problem, and by that I mean we look at so much of how Tintin's drawn. We try to understand how Hergé drew him, why he drew him in the certain ways that he did, and I think part of this comes down to when you read a comic or graphic album like Tintin, I think you as a reader, you imagine certain things, like you see still frames and you see certain beats of action and you fill in the blanks in between it. And part of our understanding is trying to look at, as I said, how he's drawn, how he gets across to you Tintin's emotion when he's angry, when he's sad, when he's about to get into a fight, when he's happy, all those type of emotions. We just really try to understand Tintin as he's drawn inside that book, and try to understand how Hergé got his character through to you. And I think that's the first step. And then from there we work out what we can take directly and what we can't. And obviously, if Tintin's shown as being, sort of like days with little stars drawn around his head, well, we know that can't work inside a film. So we have to look at things like that and say that's something we're going to have to translate across there. We look at the fact that he will do a lot of Tintin's facial performance by drawing eyebrows halfway up on his forehead. We can't do that, things like that. We've got to maintain a face going through there. So what we do is we just really you just work on that process of saying, well, we know that we have a face that we have to maintain. How can we map those expressions and those performance and everything through there? We have other issues that we have to work through as well. We have to consider the fact that we have to light Tintin, whereas the artwork is obviously, it's a very stylistic, flat lighting, line drawing across there. That wasn't the style of our film. And if you're going to light somebody, all of a sudden you're going to rely upon certain things like features on their face, like cheekbones, jaws, nose, eyebrows, things like that will cast some shape and some character. And the same things, of course, that your animator is going to have to rely upon to get performance coming through. So we just spend a really long time trying to shift Tintin from that artwork to something that we recognise a little bit more, perhaps as a human face, that we can recognise emotions on, and that will tell a story with us. But the whole way through there, Stephen and Peter are looking at what we do just constantly, and they will make sort of design change themselves after design change, because there might be something that we think, hey, this will work really well for us in animation, but Stephen will feel, yes, but you've just changed the character of Tintin. So it's a constant sort of like workflow and iteration, trying to get something that works as a character for the film, but that also works for us to be able to give a performance through it. It's just really a lot of it really is a lot of iteration. We just try hundreds and hundreds of variations on them until we finally come down to something that seems to work for us. I think some of the biggest challenges we face may not necessarily be the most obvious, but a lot of Tintin takes place indoors, and the visual style of the film that we wanted to go to was sort of fairly photographic, and that means that we wanted to feel like our light sources were very real. So we expected to have, we wanted to use area lights with area shadows that would start giving correct fall off to the lights. We wanted to use a lot of indirect lighting, bouncing light around, and that wasn't something that we had necessarily done a lot of. So we certainly had to develop techniques to be able to do that. We had to do a reasonable amount of work on render processes to be able to do that. And it was important because stylistically Stephen wanted the film to look a certain way, a way which he was comfortable with, the way which he liked a lot of his movies. And I don't think our tool set going into Tintin would have enabled us to do that. So we certainly had to do a lot of work on our lighting and rendering technology to be able to achieve the final style of the film that we have. Well, I mean, with Avatar, I think one of the interesting things that probably happened with Avatar wasn't so much a technology thing, although there was a lot of technological innovation that happened on Avatar that we then brought through. Some of it was an organisational thing out at Weta for us, because Avatar in some ways was a lot of animation, fully CG sets, fully CG characters inside there. We had to probably for the first time really develop things like layout departments. We said it was our first time really using pre-visualization on a film. Some of the things that maybe more traditional animation houses are familiar with that we just didn't have. So there was definitely those organizational sides that came through from previous shows. We did develop technology for rendering outdoor scenes with a lot of our image-based type lighting came through from Avatar. As well, but then there were things that some of our character, our facial systems, things that we'd worked on Avatar that came through. Avatar certainly at a character-wise, and I think as at a production level in terms of how we would do the show, provided us with a really good basis going into Tintin.